I stood frozen in the lobby, reading the new sign. West and Son. No mention of me. My name, gone. The staff looked anywhere but at me. My father wouldn't even make eye contact. Troy leaned on the reception desk like he'd always belonged there. And then it hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd been erased. Just like that. 28 years old, and the company I'd helped build for the past 6 years had written me out of existence. The gold letters gleamed under the morning sun, mocking everything I'd sacrificed. My hands trembled as I clutched my leather bag tighter. Troy smirked. That same cocky expression he'd worn since Dad brought him into the business 18 months ago. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to make someone acknowledge what they'd done. But my throat felt tight, and my feet wouldn't move. The receptionist, Maria, finally met my eyes. Hers were filled with pity. That look told me everything. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. I had come in early that Tuesday morning to prep for our supplier meeting. I'd even stopped at the coffee shop on 5th Street to grab my dad's favorite order, double espresso with 1 sugar, no milk. The meeting was scheduled for 8:30, and I wanted to review the quarterly numbers one more time before Mr. Dalka from Everhart Timber arrived. When I reached the conference room, Maria flinched. They already started the meeting, she whispered, her voice cracking. I'm sorry, Allie. I didn't know they were going to. She trailed off, unable to finish. Through the glass walls, I could see them. My father sat at the head of the table, exactly where he always sat. Troy occupied the chair that used to be mine, the one by the projector where I'd given dozens of presentations. Mr. Dalka was there too, nodding along as Troy gestured toward some charts. My charts. The ones I'd stayed up until midnight finishing. Nobody had called me. Nobody had texted. They deliberately started without me, and now I stood there holding 2 cooling coffee cups like an idiot. I walked past that glass conference room with the calmest expression I could manage. My dad saw me. Troy saw me. Neither one flinched or looked guilty. They just kept talking to Mr. Dalka as if I'd never existed, as if the past 6 years meant nothing. I forced my lips into something resembling a smile and kept walking. My heels clicked against the marble floor, each step echoing in the too quiet lobby. I made it to the parking lot before the tears came. Then I sat in my car and screamed until my throat hurt. The coffee cup sat in the cup holders, still warm. I'd bought my father his favorite drink, prepared for a meeting I'd organized, only to be excluded from my own company. The dashboard clock read 8:45. 15 minutes. That's how long it took for my world to fall apart. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, trying to understand what I'd done wrong. But deep down, I already knew. I'd been born the wrong gender. He called that night around 10. No apology in his voice, just matter-of-fact coldness. It wasn't personal, Allie, he said, like he was discussing the weather. Troy has vision. He understands where the industry is heading. You're too emotionally attached to the old ways. I reminded him who ran operations when he had back surgery 2 years ago. Who negotiated the Everhart contract that saved us during the recession. Who trained every single new hire since 2019. You were helping, he said flatly. That's what daughters do. They help. But running a company? That takes something different. Troy has that edge. I asked what edge Troy had besides arrogance and a business degree he'd barely earned. My father's silence spoke volumes. Then he said the words that shattered whatever relationship we had left. It was never yours to inherit, Allie. I built this for my son. Not for his child. His son. Troy wasn't even his biological son, just his best friend's kid who'd needed a job after flunking out of 2 startups. They didn't even announce it to the staff. Just quietly changed the locks one weekend and started moving things around. On Monday morning, HR called me into a small office I'd never been in before. Brenda from HR looked uncomfortable, shuffling papers she clearly didn't want to read. We're reevaluating the leadership structure, she said, avoiding my eyes. Your role is being transitioned. Transitioned. Not eliminated. Not fired. Just transitioned into nothingness. People I'd trained for years avoided me in the hallways. Former colleagues who'd laughed at my jokes during lunch suddenly found their phones fascinating when I walked by. In town, I'd run into clients at the grocery store, and they'd pretend not to see me. I became a ghost haunting my own life. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was watching everyone around me accept it as normal. Nobody questioned why the operations director who'd increased efficiency by 40% was suddenly gone. They just shrugged and moved on. I thought at least my mother would defend me. She didn't. I drove to my parents' house that weekend, hoping she'd be the voice of reason. She was in the garden, pruning roses like nothing had happened. "Your father's trying to do what's best for the family," she said, not looking up from the thorny stems. I asked how erasing me from the family business was best for the family. How was handing everything to Troy, a kid who'd joined the company less than 2 years ago, better than keeping his own daughter involved? She sighed and wiped dirt from her hands. "You're being dramatic, Allie. This is just business. You'll find something else. Just business." As if 6 years of 70-hour weeks meant nothing. As if the contracts I'd saved, the clients I'd retained, the systems I'd built were just hobbies I could replace with pottery classes. She changed the subject to the weather, asking if I thought it would rain later. I left without finishing my coffee. The betrayal from my father hurt. But my mother's silence cut deeper. I left the building for the last time on a Wednesday afternoon. No dramatic exit, no tearful goodbyes. I just packed my personal items into a cardboard box and walked out. But I kept one thing they didn't know about, a manila folder tucked into my leather bag. It contained copies of every vendor contract I'd personally negotiated over the past 6 years. Purchase agreements, delivery schedules, contact information, and detailed notes on each supplier's preferences and requirements. I didn't steal anything proprietary. These were my relationships, built through late-night phone calls and early morning meetings. I'd spent hours learning about Mr. Dalka's family, understanding what mattered to him beyond just numbers. I knew which suppliers needed flexible payment terms and which ones prioritized delivery speed. Troy had none of that knowledge. He had a business degree and an overconfident handshake. I had real relationships. And as I drove away from Weston Woodworks for what I thought would be the last time, I realized something. They'd just made their biggest mistake. Weeks passed. No calls. No apologies. Not even a text from Troy acknowledging what they'd done. The silence hurt worse than the betrayal itself. I'd expected anger, maybe even a confrontation where we'd yell and clear the air. Instead, I got nothing. Complete radio silence, as if I'd never existed. I realized they weren't just cutting me out, they were hoping I'd vanish entirely. Disappear into some other career, get married, have kids, become someone else's problem. The expectation was clear: good daughters don't make waves. Good daughters accept their place and move on quietly. But I'd never been particularly good at being quiet. I started applying for jobs, but my resume raised questions. 6 years at a family company with nothing to show for it officially. No LinkedIn recommendations because nobody wanted to go against my father. No portfolio because everything I'd built still had the Weston name on it. I felt stuck, invisible, erased from an industry I'd helped shape. I started small. 2 consulting gigs came through a former colleague who'd left Weston before the Troy era began. She remembered how I'd helped streamline her projects and recommended me to 2 smaller woodworking shops. I took both jobs under a different last name, Reed, my grandmother's maiden name. I wanted to prove to myself that I could stand on my own. No legacy name. No family connections. Just me, my skills, and my work ethic. The first client was a small custom furniture shop struggling with inventory management. I spent 2 weeks analyzing their systems, then implemented a new tracking process that cut their waste by 30%. The owner, an older craftsman named Bernard, actually thanked me with tears in his eyes. Nobody's ever cared this much, he said. The second client needed help with supplier negotiations. I used everything I'd learned at Weston, every trick and strategy I'd developed. Within a month, I'd saved them $15,000 on raw materials. Word started spreading quietly through the industry. There was a consultant who actually understood woodworking, someone who got it. Then it happened. 3 months after leaving Weston, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Is this Allie Reed?" a man's voice asked. I confirmed it was. "This is Marcus from Pinewood Supply. You used to work with us through Weston, right?" My stomach dropped. "I did," I said carefully. Marcus explained that Troy had been late on 3 consecutive payments. Delivery schedules were missed. Communication had completely broken down. "He doesn't know what he's doing," Marcus said bluntly. "We want to work with you again." Directly. I asked what he meant. "We're pulling our contract with Weston," he explained. "But we'd work with you if you're consulting now. You always treated us right." I said yes without hesitation. That phone call changed everything. If one supplier was frustrated enough to reach out, others probably were too. Troy might have inherited the company name, but he didn't inherit the relationships. Those were mine. I'd earned them through years of reliability, communication, and actually caring about people beyond just transactions. Troy saw suppliers as vendors. I saw them as partners. I began working with smaller woodworking shops, helping them streamline operations, grow their online presence, and build real trust with clients. It wasn't glamorous work. No fancy office, no executive title, just me and my laptop at coffee shops and kitchen tables. But it was mine. Every small win felt like reclaiming a piece of my dignity. A furniture maker in the Arts District hired me to redesign his production workflow. Within 2 months, he'd doubled his output without hiring additional staff. A restoration company brought me in to negotiate with a difficult supplier. I got them better terms than they'd had in 5 years. Each success proved what I'd always known: I was good at this. Really good. And I didn't need the Weston name to prove it. My client list grew through pure word of mouth. No advertising, no social media campaigns, just satisfied customers telling others. By month 4, I had more work than I could handle alone. I was turning down projects, which felt surreal after months of feeling worthless. One afternoon in late September, I got a call that changed everything. "Allie Reed?" a formal voice asked. "This is Victor Dalka from Everhart Timber." My heart stopped. Everhart was Weston's biggest supplier, providing 70% of their raw materials. Mr. Dalka had been my father's contact for over a decade. "Mr. Dalka," I said carefully. "How can I help you?" He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I'm calling because Troy Weston has mismanaged our account for the last 4 months. Payments are late. Orders are wrong. Last week, he blamed my team for his mistakes." He paused. "You used to handle our account. I told your father years ago that you were the only one who truly understood logistics. Are you still involved with Weston?" I took a breath. "No, sir. I left the company several months ago." Silence stretched between us. Then he said something that made my pulse race. "That's a problem. For them, not for you. Can we meet?" We scheduled coffee for the following Tuesday. I hung up and stared at my phone, barely believing what had just happened. The meeting happened at a cafe downtown, neutral territory. Mr. Dalka arrived exactly on time, carrying a leather portfolio I recognized from dozens of previous meetings. We exchanged pleasantries, ordered coffee, then he got straight to business. "Troy thinks he can strong-arm suppliers," he said. "Your father at least understood relationships. Troy just sees numbers." He explained that Everhart was considering pulling their contract with Weston entirely. "But I wanted to talk to you first. I'm meeting with them next week. I'd like you to come with me." I blinked, confused. Why would I do that? His expression was serious. Because I want them to see what they lost. And because I want to offer you a consulting contract with Everhart, regardless of what happens with Weston. The pieces clicked together. This wasn't just about Weston anymore. This was about my future. When's the meeting? I asked. Thursday morning. 9 o'clock. I smiled for the first time in months. I'll be there. When Thursday came, I dressed professionally but simply. No power suit, no intimidation tactics. Just competence and confidence. When Troy saw me walk into that conference room behind Mr. Dalka, his face went completely pale. My father's expression froze mid-sentence, his mouth actually hanging open slightly. The room went silent. Gentlemen, Mr. Dalka said, settling into his chair. I've brought a consultant today. Someone who understands how partnerships actually work. Troy recovered first, that familiar arrogance sliding back into place. With all due respect, Mr. Dalka, this is a private meeting between our companies. Mr. Dalka didn't smile. Then let me make this clear. Allie was our point of contact for 6 years. She saved contracts when your systems failed. She managed inventory crises. She personally handled a missed shipment during Christmas week while your son, he nodded toward Troy, was on vacation in Cabo. My father started to speak, but Mr. Dalka raised his hand. I'm not finished. Without Allie, there is no partnership. Our contract ends in 60 days. If you want to renegotiate, she'll be part of those discussions. Otherwise, we walk. The silence that followed was deafening. I didn't say a single word. I didn't need to. I just sat there, calm and professional, while they processed what had just happened. I walked out of that conference room without saying goodbye. My father called my name as I reached the elevator, but I didn't turn around. The doors closed on his face, still twisted with shock and something that might have been regret. I drove home in a daze, barely believing what had happened. That evening, my phone buzzed. A text from my father, "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. An hour later, Troy texted, "We might need your help with some transition items." I smiled at my phone. They were panicking. Good. For 6 years, I'd bent over backward to make them look competent. I'd covered for Troy's mistakes, smoothed over my father's temper, fixed problems before clients even knew they existed. And they'd repaid me by erasing my existence. Now they were spiraling, and I had front row seats. I didn't respond to Troy either. Instead, I called Mr. Dalka and accepted his consulting contract. Everhart wanted me to help them vet new suppliers and streamline their logistics across the region. It was more responsibility and better pay than I'd ever had at Weston. And it was mine on my own terms. Word spread fast in the woodworking industry. Projects at Weston started getting delayed. Clients began pulling out, citing communication issues and missed deadlines. Their reputation for reliability, built over 25 years, crumbled in less than 6 months. I heard about it through the grapevine, from suppliers and clients who reached out to ask if I was available for consulting work. "We used to work with Weston," one client told me. "But Troy doesn't answer emails. Shipments are wrong. We're done with them." Another said, "Your father built something good, but Troy's destroying it." The irony wasn't lost on me. My father had chosen Troy because he wanted someone with vision and edge. What he got was incompetence wrapped in arrogance. None of Troy's marketing buzzwords or business school theories could save them now. The foundation of any business is relationships and reliability. Troy had neither. I didn't celebrate their failures. Honestly, part of me felt sad watching something my father had built for decades fall apart. But I didn't rush in to save them either. That wasn't my job anymore. As Weston sank, my consulting business rose. Clients tripled almost overnight. Word of mouth brought me more projects than I could possibly handle alone. I started referring overflow work to other consultants, building a network of professionals who shared my values. One afternoon, a furniture company owner told me something that stuck with me. "I used to work with West and Son," he said. "Honestly, you were the only reason we stayed as long as we did. When you left, the quality of service disappeared." Others echoed the same sentiment. I'd been the glue holding things together, the person who actually cared about doing good work. Without me, the cracks showed immediately. By November, I'd made more money in 4 months of consulting than I'd earned in a full year at Weston. And I was working with people who actually respected my contributions. Nobody questioned my decisions or talked over me in meetings. Nobody treated me like I was just helping out until the real leader arrived. I was the leader. This was my business, my reputation, my future. And it felt incredible. Then came the letter. A cease and desist from Weston's lawyer, accusing me of client theft and breach of contract. I read it twice, feeling more amused than worried. They claimed I'd stolen proprietary information and poached their customers. Except I had documented everything. Every contract I'd worked on, every email exchange, every client meeting. I'd kept meticulous records because that's what good operations directors do. I called a lawyer that same afternoon. Her name was Patricia, and she specialized in business disputes. After reviewing my documentation, she laughed. "They don't have a case. You didn't sign a non-compete. Your severance, which was nothing, by the way, didn't include any restrictions. And clients choosing to work with you isn't theft." I compiled everything into a detailed PDF, timestamps, email records, contract dates, and client testimonials. Patricia sent it to Weston's lawyer with a polite note suggesting they reconsider their position. They never replied. The cease and desist disappeared as quickly as it had arrived. But the attempt revealed their desperation. They weren't just struggling anymore. They were drowning. A woodworking industry podcast reached out in December. They'd heard about my consulting success and wanted me to talk about my journey. I agreed, but I kept it professional. I never mentioned Weston by name or attacked my father publicly. Instead, I talked about the broader issue. "Sometimes your family will expect you to build their empire," I said during the interview. "They'll let you work 70-hour weeks, solve impossible problems, and carry the weight of their success. Then they'll thank you by locking the doors behind you." I talked about proving your worth beyond a family name. About building something from nothing. About knowing when to walk away. The episode went viral within the woodworking community. My inbox exploded with messages from other people, especially women, who'd experienced similar situations. Daughters pushed aside for sons. Wives dismissed by husbands. Competent professionals overlooked because they didn't fit someone's outdated image of leadership. The podcast host told me it was their most downloaded episode ever. My story had touched something raw and real in people. I'd given voice to a frustration that many felt but few discussed openly. A week after the podcast aired, my phone buzzed with a screenshot from a former Weston employee. Troy had posted a public rant on LinkedIn, blaming toxic women in business for sabotaging West and Son's success. He claimed that bitter former employees were spreading lies and poisoning client relationships. The post was unhinged, full of barely veiled references to me. "Some people can't handle not being in charge," he wrote. "So they burn bridges and destroy what others built." The comments section filled quickly. Former clients. Industry professionals. Even some Weston employees, past and present. They didn't defend Troy. They told their own stories of his incompetence, his arrogance, his complete inability to maintain basic business relationships. One client wrote, "I left because you didn't return my calls for 3 weeks." Another, "You blamed your team for your mistakes." Troy deleted the post 2 hours later, but screenshots had already spread across the industry. The internet doesn't forget. And social media meltdowns only confirm what people already suspected. Troy wasn't a visionary leader. He was a fraud who'd been handed something he didn't earn and couldn't maintain. The final blow came in January. Everhart Timber officially terminated their contract with West and Son. Mr. Dalka sent a formal letter citing repeated failures to meet contractual obligations, consistent payment delays, and breakdown of professional communication. 3 other major suppliers followed within 2 weeks. I heard through industry contacts that Weston had lost nearly 60% of their supply chain. Without reliable materials, they couldn't fulfill client orders. Projects stalled. Deadlines passed. Penalty clauses kicked in. Within 60 days, West & Son had downsized from 42 employees to 19. The & Son legacy my father had been so proud of was falling apart. And Troy's vision? It turned out to be nothing more than expensive marketing slogans and empty promises. I didn't feel triumphant watching it happen. Mostly I felt sad for the employees who'd lost jobs through no fault of their own. People like Maria the receptionist, who'd always been kind to me. People who were just trying to make a living and got caught in the crossfire of Troy's incompetence and my father's poor judgment. That same month, I quietly put in an offer on a small commercial space downtown. It was an old warehouse building that had been converted into office suites. 1 unit was available, 2,000 square feet with exposed brick walls and big windows. It used to be one of Weston's old storage units back in the 90s, before they'd moved to the larger facility. Now it would become headquarters for Reed Collective, my official consulting firm. I hired my first employee in February, a young logistics coordinator named Amanda who reminded me of myself 6 years ago. Eager, competent, overlooked. I hired a part-time bookkeeper. Then a marketing freelancer. By March, I had a small but dedicated team. We worked with 23 clients across 3 states, all in the woodworking and manufacturing sector. Reed Collective wasn't trying to be the biggest firm. Just the best. We built our reputation on actually caring about clients, understanding their specific needs, delivering results. The same principles I'd used at Weston, but without the baggage of family drama and gender bias. We grew steadily, sustainably, building something real. In April, I saw the notice online. West & Son was liquidating assets to cover debts. An auction house would be selling off equipment, furniture, and inventory. I didn't plan to attend, but curiosity got the better of me. I watched the online live stream from my new office, coffee in hand. They sold the conference table where I'd been erased, the table where Troy had sat in my chair while I stood outside holding coffee cups. It went for $50. $50 for a table that had hosted million-dollar negotiations. The irony was poetic. Equipment I'd helped purchase sold for pennies on the dollar. Furniture I'd sat in during countless late nights went to random bidders who'd never know its history. The company was being stripped for parts, and I was watching it happen in real time. Amanda noticed me staring at the screen. "You okay?" she asked. I closed the laptop. "Yeah. Just watching something end." She nodded, understanding without needing details. That's the thing about good employees. They know when to ask questions and when to just be present. People asked if I ever heard from my father again. I didn't. Not a call, not a text, not even a letter. Complete silence from both him and Troy. Part of me had expected an apology eventually, maybe after enough time had passed. But it never came. And truthfully, I stopped waiting for it. My silence wasn't revenge. It was self-preservation and power. They'd built a world that could only survive with me in it, then thrown me out like I meant nothing. It collapsed all on its own, without any sabotage or interference from me. I didn't need to burn bridges. They burned themselves. Sometimes the best response to betrayal isn't anger or retaliation. It's success. Building something better and refusing to look back. I thought about reaching out sometimes, especially late at night when old memories surfaced. But then I'd remember standing in that lobby, reading West & Son, and feeling erased. I'd remember my mother's silence and my father's cold voice saying it was never mine to inherit. Those memories kept my phone in my pocket and my focus forward. Today, Reed Collective operates from that downtown warehouse with 12 full-time employees and a client roster that spans 6 states. My clients know my name not because it was handed to me, but because I earned it. My employees are respected, valued, and paid fairly. We work hard, but nobody's working 70-hour weeks while being told they're just helping. The business is small compared to what Weston once was, but it's mine. Built on my terms, reflecting my values, growing at a sustainable pace. Every morning, I walk into that office and remember the moment I stood outside Weston Woodworks holding 2 coffee cups, feeling worthless and erased. Then I look around at what I've built since then, and I remember something crucial. Your worth isn't determined by who recognizes it. It's determined by what you do when they don't. Sometimes family will cut you out. Sometimes they'll choose someone else despite your qualifications, your dedication, and your proven track record. When that happens, you have 2 choices: disappear quietly, or prove them wrong by succeeding without them. I chose the latter. And I've never looked back. Know your worth. And if they forget it, remind them by building something they never could.